Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Anna Jordan, and I'm Senior Reporter at smallbusiness.co.uk, part of the Stubben Edge Group. In honour of International Women's Day, I'm joined by two of my colleagues from Stubben Edge to talk about women in financial services, what's changed over the years, and what could still be improved. So without further ado, hello to both of you.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Could you give us a quick introduction and tell us a bit more about your role within the company?
My name's Barretto and I'm the Deputy CEO of Stubben Edge Group and one of the founders of the business. Been with the business for about 12 years now, but also been in financial services and insurance for longer than I care to remember. So I don't particularly want to say the number of years, but it's kind of getting up to 20 years.
My name is Ewelina Kudla and I'm the Interim Director of Networks. So Stubben Edge as a group has a network of appointed representatives. So they're the client who we share our commissions with. And I've been with the business for less than a year. I'm with the business on interim basis, as I mentioned, and covering for a person who's on maternity leave currently. I've been in insurance services for about 15 years, over 15 years, I think.
Fabulous. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what attracted you both to financial services. So Karen, let's start with you, because I understand that your background is in law. So what encouraged you to make the shift over to financial services?
So it was a strange one. I don't think I woke up, one day and decided I was going to go into insurance or financial services. As you mentioned, my background was law, so I trained as a solicitor, dealing primarily with immigration, asylum seekers, etc. And I kind of realised quite quickly that really wasn't the role for me, but I definitely knew I didn't want to go into commercial law. So my first job that I applied for was with an insurance company, but doing estate planning. I quite liked the idea of it because they wanted someone who had a legal background, but I liked the fact that I could still deal with people rather than businesses or commercial litigation. So I did a lot of kind of wealth management, estate planning, wills, probate, where you actually have to deal with families, their kind of, scenarios, their situations. And that really did appeal to me. So I spent about 8 or 9 years doing that before I kind of moved into the wider insurance field. So I wasn't particularly attracted to financial services, kind of fell into it, but I liked what it had to offer.
Yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of people. How about you, Ewelina?
So similarly to Karen, I didn't actually choose to be part of financial services, although there is an appeal about being in financial services. It's such a integral part of the world's economy, right? What we do, or financial services do overall. But I simply moved to London after I graduated from university. I've got a degree in marketing. My first job ended up being in an insurance company, and it kind of evolves from there. But I feel as though once you're in a particular industry, it's very easy to stay. And that's how I ended up staying in insurance industry. And actually mainly in kind of traditional insurance, working for carriers. So this is my first experience that's slightly more fintech-based versus your traditional Lloyd's of London insurance.
Absolutely. And myself, I kind of fell into business and financial journalism as well. And not really knowing what to expect from it, I found some really great stuff from it that I wasn't expecting. How has that been for you both? What have you learned that you weren't expecting and have quite enjoyed about being in this industry?
I think for me, it's the fact that it constantly evolves. So I like the fact that insurance is really driven by people, kind of the political landscape, the economic landscape as well. And no year is ever the same. I mean, we had, the kind of epidemic in terms of COVID, which brought about a number of different risks that, insurance companies hadn't foreseen, but had to do something about it to kind of look after individuals, businesses, people across the globe. You've got natural disasters that contribute to that. And I think that's kind of on a wider scale. And sometimes it's hard to see how you can really make a difference as an individual. But what I do like about it is the fact that actually it's just constantly changing and it's challenging. You know, you don't have a pitch book, you don't have the right answer for things. You've got to learn, you've got to find ways to navigate. So that's interesting to me.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it is changing all the time. And what I'm hearing a lot is about the relationships and how integral they are to success in the role.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, you know, across our group within Stubben Edge, one of the things we've tried to do is forge very good relationships with our clients, our intermediaries, to make sure that actually we're adding value to them. We're doing something that's a little bit different, not traditional, in the way that you were saying with regards to Lloyd's, but benefiting from lessons learned across the industry. So what do they do well? What do they not do so well? How can we change things? And then how can we add value to our customers, but also the partners that we have, so be it banks, appointed representatives, insurers, you know, that's
Absolutely
important for us as well.
Mm-hmm. And as we've all said, there's so many transferable skills as well that you can take in that you might not expect would help you in insurance and more broadly in financial services. Ewelina, what would you say about that?
No, absolutely. I think going back to Karen's point about people and relationships, I think people are what is so amazing in this industry. All our clients, all our business partners, there's such a wide range of interesting people, individuals, but ultimately we're here to help people in a moment of need, right? That's what the insurance is there for. So for me, that helping people to almost continue to do their business or stay in business. I think one of my old bosses used to say, we're here to help people stay in business, and that's what insurance ultimately is for. So that element of helping and as Karen said, it's not. Sometimes it's hard to see that how an individual or one company can help and shape the industry. But I think everyone can to some extent, and we, the way that Stubben Edge is set up, we kind of help people more than just the traditional business, because we bring those different angles to play when we start a relationship with a client.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is absolutely crucial to get all those different elements together. I'd like to zoom back a little bit and talk about sort of stereotypes I can imagine that are in the industry. And I can imagine women are often in sort of helpful, kind of caring roles, and sort of, I guess, I don't know, I think that sort of translates well. But is there any kind of, has that ever held you back in a way, sort of not having the support or the resource early in your careers particularly? And what support and resource would you like to have had back at the start of your careers?
I think for me, having started off, kind of 20 years ago, there wasn't really a lot of resource, there wasn't really a lot of support. It just wasn't really spoken about in terms of females entering the industry. And I think in some ways that was good, because you didn't know what you didn't know. So, it didn't feel like there was a barrier, or there didn't feel like there was a lack of support because you didn't expect any. And I think that has allowed me to be a little bit stronger in terms of moving forward, because I didn't really know any barriers when I first started. I think actually it's become more visible now. I think it's definitely obviously more spoken about now, and it's very much in the public eye as something that needs to change. And I think it's probably only in the last kind of 10 years I've realised that maybe there were barriers, but I just wasn't aware of them when I first started. But looking back in hindsight, I think, actually, I probably was held back then, but because I didn't notice it, or it wasn't brought to the forefront, I didn't think anything of it. So I think, would I change anything? Probably not, because I was able to kind of start within the organisation and the industry without those fears holding me back. If it had been more evident and more visible, I don't know what that would have done for me. I'm glad it is now in the kind of public eye, and we are talking about it more freely. And, there is support mechanisms in place across the industry, not just within Stubben Edge, but across financial services as a whole. So I think that's important. I think it's just something that we need to keep talking about. But it shouldn't you shouldn't be held back as a result of it. I think it's just good to talk, but don't use it as something to hold you back is my view.
I think you make a valid point, because when I was thinking about what actually held me back, I don't think anything held me back, but it was the lack of awareness, because you didn't know what else was there. Whereas now the awareness of D&I and not just women, we're talking about people with different sexualities, we're talking about people with, different backgrounds. There's so much awareness of it now that perhaps sometimes we're kind of almost moving the other way a bit too much. Because after all, it's about the right person for the job, not about, what ethnicity or what the background is. But I do remember, again, going back to what Karen was saying, I do remember when I first started in the industry, I was probably one of very few women in meeting rooms. And at the time, that's how the world was. So you didn't really question it. Whereas now, most businesses have very well-established frameworks for any kind of diversity and kind of support for people in the industry. And I think our industry, even though it might be lacking in some areas in terms of development, in terms of diversity and inclusion, I think we're doing a great job. But yeah, it's something that perhaps should stay on the agenda for the foreseeable future.
And what kind of barriers sort of came to the fore once these issues were starting to become more talked about?
Well, I think for me, as I kind of progressed in terms of having more senior roles, it's like Ewelina was saying, you would go into a meeting room and be the only female within a room of kind of 8 to 10 men, and that was intimidating. And I think sometimes it was having a slight imposter syndrome in terms of am I able to have a seat at this table? Is what I have to say important, valid, important, or actually should I not be here because actually I've got people who are older than me, more experienced than me, who probably know a lot more than I do, so what could I possibly say that could change things? And I think it goes down to self-belief, and I think that's probably the most important thing, is actually having belief in yourself, because that's ultimately all you can control, is your response to others, as opposed to trying to change behaviours, personalities, a bias, etc. That's sometimes beyond your control. You can educate, but you can't really do anything about it. The only thing that you can do is how you respond and react to that. So I think I've been in, instances where it's been terrible and, overlooked or not spoken to, or eye contact hasn't been made in a meeting. And you do get a bit upset and you do get a bit annoyed, but you've got to brush yourself off and get up and live to fight another day, and, just think it's not really about you or your lack of knowledge, it's about them. So
yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in addition to that, if you came across a woman who wanted to move into insurance and financial services and they were unsure because of perhaps stereotypes or anything else that they may have heard, what would you say to them?
I would say go for it. I think if you look around if I look around at my peers nowadays, probably maybe not as close as 50-50, but 30-40% of them will be female. So I think there's room for everybody and in our industry. And I think it's not only around bringing women to the industry, it's about bringing people from all sorts of walks of life, because I think that will just help shape the industry further and bring different dimension to, the traditional stereotype person that currently works in the industry.
I think just to add to that, and I completely agree, I think the fact is, if you look at our peers and society as a whole, it's not made up of one demographic. It's made up across the board of different, individuals from different kind of walks of life. And we need to be representative of that, because how can we be in touch with what risks, what needs they have as a society if we don't look like them? Because we've got to walk in their shoes to be able to truly understand them. So I think that's important. I think the industry is realising to better represent individuals and provide the right products, services, offerings to them. You need to look more like them, because otherwise you can't really relate. So
And understand the needs.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd imagine as well that there's an expectation from customers that has changed, but is there an expectation difference since you guys started in insurance about women coming into the industry? Do they have a different sort of ideal or different mindset, or is it kind of similar to when you started out?
I think at this point, there is no kind of distinction who your, customer manager is, who the CEO of the business you work with. I think when we first started, or when I first started, I think most of the CEOs were male, and most of the senior people were male. Whereas now, I think I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think there's no expectation when it comes to what kind of person they are. If they're the right person for the job, if they've got the right, set of skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't matter whether they're male or female.
Yeah, I suppose.
And it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I suppose I'd have concerns as to whether they may think, oh, I'm too soft, or I'm not authoritative, or something like that, potentially, that they feel might hold them back by way of perception, I guess.
I don't think that is the perception anymore. It might have been. I don't know if you had a different experience, Karen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the only thing is there might be an internal kind of fear or worry for new entrants into the industry, where insurance, unfortunately, has still got some kind of traditional view attached to it, where it is male dominated, etc. And it's only when you go into the industry you start to see it's actually not like that. But I think on the outside looking in, there may be that kind of that view of insurance, and I think the industry has to do a little bit more in terms of breaking down that view to the public, to the outside world, that actually once you come within the industry, it isn't like that. But I do think there's work to be done, because I think potentially that could put off, younger individuals, females. It doesn't necessarily need to be females. It could be anything really, that could cause concern for new individuals wanting to kind of start in insurance. So I do think, there is that fear, but I think we've got to do a little bit more than we're currently doing.
Okay, great. So we've established that insurance and financial services more broadly has come a long way, and there's room for women of all kinds, all backgrounds, all personalities. So if you could give me some practical examples, what do you think could help improve things further moving forward?
I think perhaps the educational element that Karen mentioned. Maybe there is still a perception of us being the kind of old school traditional industry, and if that is the case, we need to be more upfront with our potential clients. So I guess, there's an educational element to it that we as participants of the industry have kind of an obligation to fulfill.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that I had to do as part of my kind of legal background was do a lot in terms of soft skills. So we went through kind of modules where we would do negotiation, interviewing, public speaking, that kind of thing. So things that weren't directly related to law. And I think that would actually be very helpful, in my view, for new entrants coming into the industry. It's one thing to understand and do qualifications which are financial services based, but actually giving new entrants the tools to have that confidence in terms of what they're doing and their voice is valid. and supporting them on that, I think, is invaluable. So I think as a business, we probably should be doing more. I think as an industry, we should be doing more, which is less related to, like I said, financial services exams and more about the softer skills, which I think are incredibly important, regardless of whether you're male or female. But I think that's probably something that I would suggest we spend more time doing.
Oh, absolutely. I think soft skills are so underrated cross-industry. And really, it can be a real difference between landing a role, not landing a role, or being successful in it. So.
Exactly, yeah.
Quite often landing a deal as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. As again, it comes back to that relationship building.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And understanding the client's needs and understanding that they might be from, different background. They might have other issues that without soft skills, you never get to the bottom of and understand their needs fully, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, these are all absolutely crucial. Well, thank you so much both for your time. Is there any last things you'd like to say before we wrap up? Any words of wisdom or?
I think for me, it's kind of going back to, it's about your self-belief and your confidence, rather than it's anything really that the industry is not doing well enough. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but there's room for improvement in all walks of life, in all different areas. But having that confidence is incredibly important, and you've got to work hard at it. It doesn't, come naturally. You've got to put the effort in. But the other thing I think is really important is you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, and you've got to enjoy it. You've got to like the people you're working with, because that will come across. So I think it's being passionate, being kind of happy in what you're doing, getting a sense that you are making a difference, kind of however small or large it is, just having that belief. So I think that's the things I've learned, and I'm still working on. I don't think I've got there yet.
I think I would just add that if you're thinking about a career in financial services, in insurance in particular, don't be put off by the traditional comments that you might hear about the industry, because actually once you're in it, you realize there's a lot of interesting people, there's a lot of fun to be had, and at the end of the day, we're helping other people. So there's that element, and everybody's welcome. So don't feel you don't fit the kind of the personality that the market's looking for, because there isn't one. We need people from all walks of life to make it more interesting and what it should be.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you both.
Thank
for
you,
your time.
Anna.
And hopefully that was illuminating for you. And thank you again for joining us. If you want to find out a bit more about what Stubben Edge does, visit www.stubbenedge.com. See you next time.